Hey, how you all doing this evening? Thank you for viewing, and I am with Allan Ruhl today, and we're gonna have a really big topic to discuss. How you doing?
I am excited about this one, John.
Uh,
Excited with capital E as in Eastern Orthodox.
Good one. No, I am pumped about this one. I was super excited when you brought it up, and really looking forward to hearing what you've got to present. As you know, we just referenced, and as the title says, Allan Ruhl is going to be giving us reasons why he is not an Eastern Orthodox. So I'm really just going to leave it up to him for now to just explain everything to us. And if you want, with that, do you want to take it away?
Yeah. Now I do just want to give one qualifier. You said this was my idea. That's half true. Um, I know you had done a live stream with three or four YouTubers and
Mhm.
about this same topic, and I was supposed to join, but because of circumstances, I couldn't join, and so I'm like, hey, you think I could do my own exclusive stream on this on your channel because I know you like this topic, and so I thought, hey, let's do this. So yeah, it's partially my idea, but I'm partially building off your previous idea.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right, I will get started. I think I come from a unique perspective in this. My family is Uniat. We're from Eastern Europe. I'm part Russian, part Ukrainian. Um, I've got some Orthodox family members, although they're more Uniat than Orthodox. I've been to about half a dozen Eastern Orthodox majority countries. If you talk to some of these online and on Ortho Bros, if you ask them if they've ever been to an EO country, they haven't. I've been to six, maybe seven, depending if you consider it a country. I've been to Transnistria. Not everyone considers that a country. Um, I've been to many Eastern Orthodox liturgies. In 2015, I went to a Rokor Pascha liturgy where they say uh, Christos Voskresi, and everyone goes Vaisno Voskresi. Um, I speak a language that about half the Eastern Orthodox Christians in the world speak. Um, yeah, so I have a unique perspective. Now, um, I want to give objective reasons only. It's not like, well, I just love Saint Francis and Saint Therese so much that I couldn't leave the Catholic. No, no, I'm sorry. That's not objective. That's subjective. Nothing wrong with that. If you want to do that, you can do that. But and I'm not going to say that the Catholic Church has like a lot of people. Another reason people argue is that we've spread our faith more, and yeah, we have, but again, that's subjective. That just means we've been better at something than them, and we've done it more than them. And if you talk to the more sober-minded Eastern Orthodox, not Ortho Bros, they've even told me, we could learn a lot from you guys in terms of spreading the faith. Again, you're not going to find that attitude with the online and on Ortho Bros, but in terms of uh, talking to most people, they'll concede that. In fact, Father Josiah Trenham, I believe, said that. Um, and besides, now today the Protestants are doing more missionary work than Catholic or Orthodox. So does that mean they're true? No, that does not mean they're true. It's just that certain people have been better at certain things that God has commanded all of us to do. So my reasons are not going to be subjective. They're going to be purely objective reasons. Now, I've got three reasons. I'm going to give all three, and I'm going to break down all the details. There's going to be no yeah, so okay. Now, if you ask a Catholic or an Eastern Orthodox, how does one connect with God? How does one receive the grace of God? It is through the sacraments, sometimes called the mysteries. Now, in the thing about the Eastern Orthodox Church, there is no not even an ounce of consistent sacramental theology. None. And I'll tell you how the story came. I mentioned I've been to several Eastern Orthodox majority countries. In 2014, I was in Serbia. And you travel around Serbia. Who's the big saint? You were an Orthodox catechumen for a while, John. Who's the big Serbian saint?
That's a good question. I can't think of him off the top of my head.
Ah, I guess you didn't go to a Serbian church then.
Nah,
Saint Sava.
Russian.
Saint Sava is the big Serbian saint. You go there, Saint Sava's the guy they talk about. And so I wanted to learn more about this guy. And this is something I do on all vacations, by the way. Like I go home, I buy books about the place I went to. So I bought a biography of Saint Sava. And it's written actually by an Orthodox saint, Saint Nikolai Velimirovich. So I read this, and I noticed something on the very first page of this saint biography. Okay. He was born in Ribnica near Old Dushlea and was baptized first by Latin-speaking priests there, but later rebaptized by clergy recognized by the Patriarch of Constantinople in the Church of Holy Apostles at Rosh. So he's rebaptized. He was born in the 1100s. So, yeah, you have this is heresy right here. There's one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and the early church, the theology of the early church. Well, I'll get to that in a moment. Something else, and if you guys read the Orthodox Church by Ware, you get a lot of information about the baptisms. This is the 2015 edition. I'm going to be quoting from page 94 and 95. So, okay. Oh my. I need to just give me a second.
Yeah, no worries.
I got to pull up the quotes. I had them up. I must have closed that tab. But never fear. Okay. All right. Okay. So my quotes come from that book. All right. He says on page 94, in 1724, a large part of the Orthodox Patriarchate of Antioch submitted to Rome. For the record, these are known as the Melkites. After this, the Orthodox authorities, fearing that the same things might happen elsewhere in the Turkish Empire, were far stricter in their dealings with Roman Catholics. The climax in anti-Roman feeling came in 1755 when the patriarchs of Constantinople, Alexandria, and Jerusalem declared Latin baptism to be entirely invalid and demanded that all converts to Orthodoxy be baptized anew. And then he goes on to say, this measure remained in force in the Greek world until the end of the 19th century. So it's nothing to do with theology. It's, the Latins are being aggressive in their evangelism. Let's declare their baptisms invalid. I mean, that's not how theology works. And now we're only talking about the patriarchs, Constantinople, Jerusalem, Alexandria, etc. If you go to Russia, it was a whole new ballgame. Again, I quote from Ware, page 94, 95 of that same edition. Russians generally baptized Roman Catholic converts from 1441, between 1441 and 1667. But since 1667, they have not normally done so. Again, in these dates, nothing changed in Catholic baptism or Catholic theology or anything like that. They seem to be completely random, and that's not how theology works. So it's like a coin toss almost, depending on where you are. There is a quote I want to give. It's by a guy named Vladimir Solovyov in the new edition 2013, pages 66 and 67. I don't have the physical copy of this one. I only have the PDF. And it says, quote, William Palmer, a distinguished member of the Anglican Church and of the University of Oxford, wished to join the Orthodox Church. He went to Russia and Turkey to study the contemporary situation in the Christian East and to find out on what conditions he must be admitted to the communion of the Eastern Orthodox. At St. Petersburg and at Moscow, he was told that he had only to abjure the errors of Protestantism before a priest, who would thereupon administer to him the sacrament of holy chrism or confirmation. But at Constantinople, he found that he must be baptized afresh. As he knew himself to be a Christian and saw no reason to suspect the validity of his baptism, which incidentally was admitted without question by the Orthodox Russian Church, he considered a second baptism would be a sacrilege. On the other hand, he could not bring himself to accept orthodoxy according to the local rules of the Russian Church, since he would then become Orthodox only in Russia while remaining a heathen in the eyes of the Greeks. And he had no wish to join a national church, but to join the Universal Orthodox Church. No one could solve his dilemma, so he became a Roman Catholic. So, yeah, now, sometimes a counter objection you will get is, well, these groups did not exist in the first millennium, so there's no canon against them. There's no canon against to say baptize Anglicans or not, Palmer or Roman Catholics or whoever. The groups that were not in the first millenniums, supposedly, obviously, the Catholic Church is the original church. But now the Anglicans didn't exist in the first millennium. Catholics and Orthodox both agree with that. But what did exist was the theology of baptism. And so the Anglicans didn't exist, but as soon as they came along, you apply the theology of baptism, which was there, to the Anglican, and you decide if they're baptized or not. For Catholics, this has never been a problem. The Anglican baptism is 100% valid, always has been. Not the priesthood. We will get to that in a moment. Okay, and what was that theology? The theology in the first millennium, there's a few detractors, but they're irrelevant because I'm going to show you why. What was ex opere operato? That was the belief. So Pope Stephen, Saint Augustine, Saint Vincent of Lerins, Saint Jerome, all and many more. Pope Leo the Great, all of them agreed with ex opere operato. Now there may be an odd detractor here or there, but both Catholic and Orthodox agree when an ecumenical council settles something, it's the odd detractor is irrelevant, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's an odd detractor, and so I'm going to quote Canon 95 of the Council of Trullo. Those who from the heretics come over to Orthodoxy, and to the number of those who should be saved, we receive according to the following order and custom: Arians, Macedonians, Novatians, who call themselves Cathari, Aristeri, and Testarescatedicitai or Tetradit. Very hard names to pronounce. I apologize. And Apollinarians, we receive on their presentation of certificates and on their anathematizing every heresy, which does not hold as does the Holy Apostolic Church of God. Then first of all, we anoint them with the holy chrism on their foreheads, eyes, nostrils, mouth, ears, and as we seal them, we say the seal of the gift of the Holy Ghost. But concerning the Paulianists, it has been determined by the Catholic Church that they shall by all means be rebaptized. The Eunomians also, who baptize with one immersion, and the Montanists, who here are called Phrygians, and the Sabellians, who consider the Son to be the same as the Father and are guilty in certain other grave matters, and all the other heresies, for there are many heretics here, especially those who come from the region of the Galatians, all of their number who are desirous of coming to the Orthodox faith, we receive as Gentiles. And on the first day, we make them Christians. On the second, catechumens. Then on the third day, we exorcise them. At the same time, also breathing thrice upon their faces and ears. And thus we initiate them, and we make them spend time in church and hear the scriptures, and then we baptize them. And the Manichaeans and Valentinians and Marcionites and all similar heresies must give certificates and anathematize each his own heresy, and also Nestorius, Eutyches, Dioscorus, Severus, and all the other chiefs of such heresies, and those who think with them, and all the aforesaid heresies, and so they become partakers of the Holy Communion. Now, we could break that down bit by bit, but what you see is that this is ex opere operato theology. Like, it's not just. Can you imagine if Father Peter Hears lived back then? He'd be like, "You got to read my book. I say baptize everyone," you know. But like, obviously, that's not the Church of Peter Hears. That's the Catholic Church, you know. They have ex opere operato. That was the early church, and Catholics have had that, and we've applied that to new groups who have come along: Eastern Orthodox, Anglican, you name it. Again, those groups weren't in the first millennium, but the theology was theology of Canon 95, so we apply it to them. Now, some use a clever objection. Oh, they pour it on the head 3 times versus triple immersion. Well, according to the Didache and Paul the Deacon, that was accepted, the triple pouring. And besides, the Serbian Orthodox Church, go into YouTube, look up a Serbian Orthodox baptism, and they pour it on the head 3 times, just like the Catholics do. And those baptisms are accepted in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Now, this deficiency in sacramental theology goes to priests who convert as well. Some individual priests are ordained, converting from Catholicism. Some aren't. They're just go through what's called a vesting ceremony. Now, and also entire regions of uniats have returned to the Eastern Orthodox Church. If you go to Western Ukraine, there's what you call uniats, but there had been uniats in other regions as well, but because of politics or some other thing, have come back into the Eastern Orthodox Church. Romania, especially the Transylvania region, parts of Ukraine, Bulgaria in the 13th century, and a couple other places. And when they returned to the Orthodox Church, and Belarus as well in the 18th century. And when they returned to the Orthodox Church, it's not like the church from Constantinople or Moscow will send a bunch of bishops. Okay, your bishops need to be made true bishops. We're going to ordain your priests. We're going to baptize everyone in the country because they had it from. No, they just allow it to continue as it is. They just allow it to continue as it is. So, I mean, if there are no sacraments outside the church, like I've heard several people say, there are entire regions of Eastern Orthodoxy that today their bishops, priests, and their deacons are laymen. So entire regions. Now I could go on and give a lot more examples of this, but I think you guys get the point. There's no consistent theology across the board. You just have to look the other way, smile, and nod. There's a video on Trulia's channel, Orthodox Christian Theology, with Father Patrick Ramsey, where they talk about this. Go watch that video. I recommend everyone watch that video, and you will realize how, frankly, hopeless the situation is, and it's not ever going to get fixed. Basically, there are no. Basically, what Father Patrick said, there are no sacraments outside the church except when there are. You know, and that goes entirely against Ephesians 4 of one Lord, one faith, one baptism. For now, the Catholics, for example, we've determined, I mentioned the Anglicans, we determined that their baptisms are fully valid, but we've looked at their priesthood, their documents of ordination, and we said those words aren't going to give a priest. So therefore, they're not ordained priests. So there's something called the Anglican ordinariate. Whenever a priest converts from the Anglican Church to the Catholic Church, they're often put in what's called the ordinariate, and they're all ordained anew. They're all ordained anew. Now, I want to say something else about Father Peter Heers. He's a heretic, even by Eastern Orthodox standards, with his corrective baptism nonsense. But the reason he holds his position is that he sees the chaos and the contradiction that I see right now, and I've just presented to everyone. He knows this stuff. He knows that there's all this chaos in terms of sacramental theology. Again, how we commune with God. So that's why he comes up with his frankly heretical and outrageous and antichrist position. So it's theological chaos on the most important thing, how we commune with God. Now, and it's sacrament, so it's the utmost importance. For example, there's something in Eastern Orthodoxy that not all of them agree on. Some Eastern Orthodox churches teach that each time you go get the Eucharist, you need to go confession at the Vespers of the night prior. Some Eastern Orthodox churches do that. Some are like the Catholic Church. You only have to do that if you've committed a mortal sin. I don't think they use that word, but a bad sin, shall we say. Now, I think that's a big deal, but that's not a deal breaker. You could say that those groups that require confession every time, it's better safe than sorry, right? So, yeah. So basically, no consistent doctrine, not even close, in terms of sacramental theology. And John Coloraffi's comment is, John, you don't mind putting that on the screen? If you can't figure, yeah, they claim to be the one true church, but they don't know what a baptism is. Can they one Lord, one faith, one baptism, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I'm sorry, I did want to say Elijah's correct. I remember Peter Mohila talks about mortal and venial sins. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. So, but yeah, my point stands though. It's some churches make you confess every time, some don't. Again, it's a big deal, but not a deal breaker. Sacramental stuff, baptism, priesthood is a deal breaker, and there's many more historic examples I could have picked. All right, that's the number one reason. Number two is the C word, Caesaropapism. Since the 4th century, the emperors, the Roman emperors, have got involved in the church. Some, kind of allowed things to go. Some tried to get their fingers into it, and tried to become the Pontifex Maximus of old. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, but they essentially tried to be the head of the church. Now, in 451, you have the Council of Chalcedon, which created two separate churches inside of the it created two churches essentially in the empire: Chalcedonian, defined by the Tome of Leo, and the Monophysites, or sometimes called Miaphysites. So, and of course, to be an emperor, it's one empire, one faith, right? But there were two churches. So sometimes the emperors tried to take matters into their own hands, which they shouldn't have done. For example, they tried to bring them all under one church with the Henoticon, a heretical document promoted by the Emperor Zeno and his patriarch Acacius. The Pope excommunicates Acacius, and eventually the Pope is vindicated, or the popes are vindicated, because you have the formula of Hormistus, where they come back, they reaffirm the Tome of Leo, the Henoticon is finished. So the emperor tried to screw around with the theology, the Pope saved the day. Now, in the 7th century, you have what's called the Monothelite heresy. Let me quote a Byzantine chronicle here, St. Theophanes the Confessor. So this is in 629, 630 about. In this year, Athanasius, the patriarch of the Jacobites, that's Oriental Orthodox, the Monophysites, came to the Emperor Heraclius while he was in Hierapolis. He was a tricky man and an evildoer because of his innate Syrian knavery. Sounds a bit racist. When he began talks on the faith with the emperor, Heraclius promised to make him patriarch of Antioch if he would accept the Council of Chalcedon. Again, the emperor shouldn't be doing that. It happened. It even happened a bit in the West, but it shouldn't have happened. That's an abuse that crept in. He hypocritically accepted the synod, Chalcedon, agreeing there were two conjoint natures in Christ. But then he asked the emperor how he should refer to Christ's energies and wills. Were they dual or single? The emperor was confused. He wrote to Sergius, the bishop of Constantinople, and also called on Cyrus, the bishop of Phocis, who agreed with Sergius that there was one will and one energy. And then he published documents saying this is the Christian faith, the ecthesis, and the typos. And again, guess who was there to keep him in check? The popes stood strong on this. And eventually Pope Agatho saved the day with his letter. Of course, he was building off the work at the Lateran Council of 649. And with his letter, it killed the heresy and peace was restored. The true faith was restored. So again, the emperor had promoted heresy, but the Pope had kept him in check. So after 1054, if there was heresy, there was no Pope to keep the emperor in check, right? The Pope's no longer part of the church. So, and the position of the emperor grew and grew and grew and grew to where he's not just appointing bishops, he's bringing on for himself lofty titles. I've got this book, the Alexiad. It's a biography from the daughter of Alexius Comnenus. Her name's Anna Comnena. And she calls her dad the high priest. Let me show you the quote. One can truly say the emperor, this is on page 182 of the Penguin edition, one can truly say the emperor was the most saintly person, both because of his virtues and in his manner of speaking, a high priest, as it were, of perfect reverence. Yeah, and so yeah, so like the high priest, the emperor's your high priest, but again, it gets even spicier. This book right here, it continues after the death of Alexius Comnenus. It starts with Alexius' death. It goes from 118 to 1207. It's written by Nicetus Cognatus, a chronicler of that day. And I bought this originally for my Fourth Crusade research because he was in Constantinople in 1204 when it got sacked by the Crusaders. But I learned so much else when reading through this. And we're going to see what he did. He bound the church to a heretical version of John 14:28. You know, my Father is greater than I. And Elijah's correct. It actually brings that up in there. Elijah Hallberg. Yeah, it brings it up in here. All right. So I'm going to show how Caesaropapism went off the rails when the Pope was no longer involved. I'm going to give two theological examples. This is Manuel Comnenus, the grandson of Alexius Comnenus. And he dealt with three doctrinal controversies that when he shouldn't have. But here's what happened. Page 120. And by the way, I'm going to be quoting from 4 pages. If you want, send me a direct message on X, and I'll send you the clip of these 4, because this book is $90 American. It's the second most expensive book I own. All right. I'm going to read page 120. Some years later, Manuel began an investigation of the saying of the God-man, my Father is greater than I. He showed little concern for the exegesis of the Fathers, which were excellent and sufficient for the exposition and clarification of the issue, but instead introduced his own interpretation, contentiously defending his novel beliefs by forcing the sayings of the blessed teachers on the ecumeny. unsullied in the truth and spoken with divine wisdom to suit his own definition, he proposed to have his answer sanctioned. There were some who contended that the Father was called greater as the cause of the Son, while some understood this saying to refer to the human nature and assumed flesh and not to the Logos, so that by his going to and coming from the Father, the Prince of this world, the and searcher should find no place whatsoever in him. Others consider the saying greater to apply to the Logos, not only in his nature and essence, but also because of the extreme kenosis and humiliation of his incarnation. Still, others piously accepted uh, other interpretations, but Manuel, I know not on what grounds, rejected these as not adequately addressing the issue and gave his own definition. He convened a synod, assembling all those who were learned in the divine doctrines, and exhorted everyone to subscribe to the dogmatic tome, laying down this definition. Quote, I concur with the teachings of the God-bearing fathers pertaining to my Father is greater than I, close quote. And I affirm that this saying refers to his created and passible flesh. I do not know how they designated the flesh-bearing Son as inferior to the Father, for if indeed he was divested of his equality because he assumed human nature and dwelt among us, he would not thus have been able to preserve his own glory, confined by the limitations of kenosis, or had he not deified and exalted that which had been abased by rendering it a partaker of his glorification by way of the union of the two natures, he himself in turn would have been abased, which would be absurd. In blazing this doctrine in red letters, as though with a flaming sword, Manuel threatened anyone who impulsively dared to scrutinize it with expulsion from the faith and death. That's harsher than the Spanish Inquisition, by the way. Especially anyone who grumblingly attacked it. He had the decree inscribed on tables of stone on the advice of certain men and set them up in the great church, presumably the Hagia Sophia. All others looked with suspicion upon the analysis of that which had been confirmed, making the Logos appear inferior because of the flesh, especially because it ignored the doctrine of kenosis and the meeting of his human nature. Yeah. So I mean, that he binds the church to a heretical interpretation, but under pain of excommunication and death, like bound him to heresy. That's what happened.
Mm.
And I know someone like an Orthodox in 2024 say, "Well, I'm not bound to that belief." It's like, I thought your faith didn't change, you know.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's the unchanging churches. Again, no one reads this stuff. I'm the only one who reads primary Byzantine sources, Catholic or Orthodox, online. I'm the only one who does.
Mm.
And boy, do you find out good stuff. And there's some good stuff up and coming. So, okay. All right. This is the third doctrinal controversy he was involved in. What a thing it was that this man wrought. Near the end of his life, between March and May of 1180, included among the excommunications listed in the book on catechism is the anathema directed against the god of Muhammad, about whom is stated, he neither begat nor was begotten, and that he was a solid holopheros. Manuel proposed to have the anathematization expunged from all the catechetical books, beginning with the Codex of the Great Church. The reason was specious. He contended that it was scandalous that the Hagarenes, the Muslims, when being converted to our God-fearing faith, should be made to blaspheme God in any manner. So Manuel believed they shouldn't condemn Muhammad's God because that's the same God as us. So so who won this battle? Who won this battle, and who won it down till today? He summoned, therefore, the great Theodosius, who at the time governed and adorned the chief throne, presumably the patriarch, as well as those hierarchs of the city who excelled in learning and virtue, and made known his proposal to them with a bombastic introduction to the issue. They all shook their heads in refusal, unwillingly even to listen to his proposals, which they considered slanderous and detracting from the most true glory of God. They piously explained the text, which supposedly was a cause for scandal and an obstacle, and made it quite clear that it was not God, the creator of heaven and earth, who was subject to anathema, but the solid God fabricated by the deluded and demoniacal Muhammad, and who has neither begotten nor did he beget, for Christians believe God to be a father, and it was these absurd and frivolous words of Muhammad which they uttered, prescribed, inasmuch as he did not know the meaning of Hollis Forest, and the mind in his breast was one not to be beguiled. Manuel let the opposition perish and set forth his own tone with the assistance of those members of the imperial court who he knew to be opportunistic and well learned, in which Muhammad's babbling, for I cannot call it theology, was upheld, and former emperors and members of the hierarchs were thoroughly upbraided for being so stupid and thoughtless as to suffer the true God to be placed under anathema. Okay. So, now, I can't read all of it again because it takes forever, but there was a back and forth. And this is how it ended. On the following day, when the synod convened at the patriarchal residence to act upon the agreement, for the imperial officials appeared at dawn to assemble the bishops, they were no longer of the same mind, but again shook their heads in denial, contending that the written decree still contained certain reprehensible words that should be excised and replaced by others that would give no offense whatsoever. To their inconsistency and fickleness plainly showed that they were devoid of any intelligence. After a long delay, they barely agreed to remove the anathema of Muhammad's God from the catechetical books and to write in the anathema of Muhammad, anathematized the false prophet, but and all of his teachings. Having proclaimed and confirmed the doctrine, the many synods and assemblies came to an end. So the emperor won against all of the bishops who were saying, no, it's not the same God. And he was like, yes, it is. We got to take the anathema out. So I talked to a well-known Eastern Orthodox priest who a well-known Eastern Orthodox priest who's online, and I got him to send me the confessions that you have to make. If you're a Catholic who becomes Eastern Orthodox, you got to denounce the papacy, the filioque, and a couple other things. Well, it's like that for all faiths. If you're a Protestant, a Jew, a whatnot, and a Muslim, they have one for Muslims. And I've got the anathema, and we'll see who won. Is the God of Mohammed condemned? The Mohammedans renounceth the Mohammedan faith and its sophistries, Muhammad as being a false prophet, the Quran and all false legends, laws, and traditions therein contained, the pilgrimage to Mecca for worship as salutary to the soul, the inculcation of polygamy in his life, and the teaching as to sensual pleasures in paradise, and the blasphemies which Mohammedans utter touching Christ, our Savior, his most holy mother, and Christians. Did you hear, John, a condemnation of the God of Muhammad?
I did not. No.
You didn't. Why? Because Emmanuel Comnenus, one in the 12th century. Again, no one knows this stuff. No one knows this stuff. Only I do, because I'm the only one who reads primary sources, me and the other Paul. Scholars won't tell you this stuff, at least not in full detail. Okay, where are we here? Okay, now the idea of the emperor as the head of the church got so bad that in the early 1390s, the Church of Russia, which was an Orthodox church, stopped commemorating the emperor. because at that time the whole Byzantine Empire was just a city state. It was essentially a city state, and it was a vassalage of the Turkish Islamic Sultan. So, um, so Patriarch Anthony IV of Constantinople wrote a letter to the Prince of Moscow, the Grand Prince, as he was called. His name was Vasily I, and he says a lot of stuff in this letter. Oh, and you can find this in Byzantium, Seen Through Church Society, and Seen Through Contemporary Eyes by Deno John Ginakopoulos. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'm bad with Greek names. Page 143 and 144, I believe. Yeah. It says, therefore, my son, this is the patriarch talking to the secular ruler of Moscow. Therefore, my son, you are wrong to affirm that we have the church without an emperor. For it is impossible for Christians to have a church and no empire. The Basileia, that's the empire, and the church have a great unity and community. Indeed, they cannot be separated. Well, I don't need to remind everyone what happened in 1453. The Turks finally conquered Constantinople, and the Turks conquered Constantinople, and it came to an end. The empire came to an end, but it said they cannot be separated. So they were so confused, the Orthodox Church, what to do, that I gotta find the page. I didn't mark this page. Oh, wait. Okay. That the Sultan got together with his friend Gennadius Scholarius. When the Sultan saw him and had in a short time had proofs of his wisdom and prudence and virtue. This is Critavolis. Critavolis was a Greek who served in the court of Mehmet the Conqueror. This is History of Mehmet the Conqueror, published around 1470, because he died before Mehmet the Conqueror died. When the Sultan saw him, talking about Galerius, and had a short time and proofs of his wisdom and prudence and virtue, and also of his power as a speaker, and of his religious character, he was greatly impressed with him, and held him in great honor and respect, and gave him the right to come to him at any time, and honored him with liberty and conversation. He enjoyed his various talks with him and his replies, and he loaded him with noble and costly gifts. In the end, he made him patriarch and high priest of the Christians, Turkish Islamic Sultan, who spent his life conquering Christian lands, Catholic and Orthodox, by the way, takes someone and makes them the patriarch and high priest of the Christians. Figure that one out. In the end, he made him patriarch and high priest of the Christians, and gave him, among many other rights and privileges, the rule of the church and all its power and authority, no less than that enjoyed previously under the emperors. He also granted him the privilege of delivering before him fearlessly and freely many good disquisitions concerning Christian faith and doctrine, and he himself went to his residence, taking with him the dignitaries and wise men of his court, and thus paid him honor. And in many other ways, he delighted the man. So, the man who converted the Hagia Sophia into a mosque appoints a patriarch for the Christians. I'm sorry, but how is that valid? Yeah, so it seems pretty. So that's why personally I don't date Eastern Orthodoxy to 1054. I date it to the fall of Constantinople. Now, I'm not saying the church before that was the Catholic Church. It was the Imperial Byzantine Church, 1054 to 1453. That was constantly in and out of communion. And okay, that's the second argument finished. Final argument is the papacy. Now, the papacy is too much to unpack here. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Um, but let me say, the Catholics believe in the papacy, the Eastern Orthodox don't, but no other group believes in the papacy. The thing is, the Eastern Orthodox Church puts you in the worst position to debate against the papacy than every other group. Protestants and Oriental Orthodox and the Assyrian Church of the East. You're in the worst position to go against the papacy. So when people say, well, I couldn't believe in the papacy, so I became Eastern Orthodox. Well, that put you in the worst position to argue it against. Now, I'm going to there's a lot of proof I can pick, but I'm going to pick the letter of Pope Agatho because it's accepted at an ecumenical council. Now, Pope Agatho, in this letter, he takes the three classic proof texts, Matthew 16, 18 through 19, John 21, 15 through 17, and Luke 22, 32, and applies them to the papal office in a letter accepted by the council. And he references the Matthew 16. He does not quote it, but he references and applied to himself. Same with John 21, 15 through 17. And with Luke 22, he quotes it and he gives a detailed exegesis of it. A detailed exegesis, not honorifics, but expounding theology. Let me show you what it is. And again, so technically, if you're Eastern Orthodox and you accept the councils, you have to believe that those three classic papal proof texts apply to the papacy. Because you accept this council, that's why you're in the worst position. The Protestants and Orientals and all the others, they don't need to do this. They say, who cares? But as an Eastern, you need to believe in this. Okay, so I'm going to quote the relevant portion. Again, this is free online. For this is the rule of the true faith, which this spiritual mother of your most tranquil empire, the Apostolic Church of Christ, he's talking about Rome, and you'll find out in a second, has both in prosperity and adversity always held and defended with energy, which it will be proved by the grace of Almighty God, has never erred from the path of apostolic tradition. So, by the way, Pope Vigilius, the Meletian Schism, can't use those because this letter's accepted. It says they've never erred. So again, Pope Vigilius, I've also often said, is only works if you're a Protestant. Thank you, Agatho. Okay. Nor has she been depraved by yielding to heretical innovations, but from the beginning she has received the Christian faith from her founders, the princes of the apostles of Christ. So not all the apostles, so it's not talking about the church in general, the princes of the apostles, Peter and Paul, founded the church at Rome, Peter being the first bishop, and remains undefiled unto the end. Has the end come? No. And it will remain undefiled to the end based on the promise from Christ, which we're about to get to. According to the divine promise of the Lord and Savior himself, which he uttered in the Holy Gospels to the prince of his disciples, saying, quote, Peter, Peter, behold, Satan has desired to have you, that he might sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for thee that thy faith fail not. And when thou art converted, strengthen the brethren, close quote. That's Luke 22:32. Let your tranquil clemency, therefore, consider, since it is the Lord and Savior of all whose faith it is, that promised that Peter's faith should not fail, and exhorted him to strengthen his brethren. How it is known to all that the apostolic pontiffs, the predecessors of my littleness, that just proves that it's his office that they're talking about, have always confidently done this very thing, of whom also our littleness, since I've received this ministry by divine designation, wishes to be the follower, although unequal to them, and the least of all, woe is me if I neglect to preach the truth of my Lord, which they have sincerely preached. And it keeps going on, and there's a lot more information, but I can't quote it all. The point is, this is accepted by Eastern Orthodox. we could talk about any of the three verses, but let's talk about Luke 22. That's in-depth exegesis of Luke 22:32. It's not flowery language or honorifics. And if you take a look at Pastor Aeternus, which is Vatican I, 1870, I'm going to quote you the part where it talks about that verse. For the Holy Spirit was promised to the successors of Peter, not so that they might by his revelation make known some new doctrine, but that by his assistance they might religiously guard and faithfully expound the revelation or deposit of faith transmitted by the apostles. Indeed, their apostolic teaching was embraced by all the venerable fathers and reverenced and followed by all of the Orthodox doctors. He's talking about Constantinople III, because they all accepted this letter. All the fathers there accepted it. For they knew very well that this see of Peter always remains unblemished from any error. That's exactly what Agatho's letter said. In accordance with the divine providence of the Lord and Savior, to the Prince of the Apostles, quote, I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail, and when you have turned again, strengthen your brethren, close quote. So it's pretty much the exact same thing. Now, in 1848, there was something called the Encyclical of the Patriarchs. It was an Orthodox encyclical signed by 4 patriarchs and 29 metropolitan bishops. You can find it on the website orthodoxinfo.com. Paragraph 12. It's too long to read. Not only do they disagree with that interpretation of Agatho and Vatican I, it mocks that interpretation. It mocks what Agatho said. So if you accept Constantinople III, hence you accept the letter of Agatho, you need to accept his interpretation of Luke 20, his detailed exegesis of Luke 22:32. Catholic Church does that. Eastern Orthodox does not. You can also say the same thing about Matthew 16, 18, 19, John 21:15 through 17 as well, because that's touched on in the letter. I don't have time to go into all of that, but know that for sure. Whether it's Pope Agatho, I know that our good buddy Joseph Sweden is in the chat. Pope Gregory VII, by the way, your favorite pope of all time, quotes Luke 22:32 the exact same way as Agatho and as Pastor Aeternus in Vatican I, Pius IX. So, so because they accept this, and there is many other things in the ecumenical councils I could quote. I specifically took this letter because it's accepted by an ecumenical councils. I could have brought stuff by Pope Martin, but Pope Martin is, just a guy. He didn't have his stuff accepted by an ecumenical council. Pope Agatho did. Thereby, they need to abide by his detailed exegesis of those 3, including my example, Luke 22:32. Those 3 verses, and you saw me give Luke 22:32. The Catholics agree with that to this day. The Eastern Orthodox reject that to this day. And that is my 3rd reason. And I don't know how long that took. We're at 53 minutes. So.
No, that was really good. And I'm sure you presented some really fresh and new info, particularly with the second point, with all of those primary sources you were having to use that most people aren't even familiar with. So
no one reads this stuff. This is a gold mine. Guys, read the primary sources, of the Byzantine Empire. They're a gold mine. And I promise you, it will keep you away from Eastern Orthodoxy. That alone, believe you me. There's an embarrassment of riches there. And there's so much more. There's, oh man, it's just beautiful. We didn't even get a chance to get to the Arsonite schism, where that's a century game of patriarchal thrones, where the patriarch Arsenius excommunicates Emperor Michael VIII, and then he's an excommunicated emperor, removes Patriarch Arsenius, and he puts in Patriarch Joseph. Patriarch Joseph, he's like, all right, I'm excommunicated. patriarch, the guy I just put in, remove my excommunication. Oh, sure, Emperor. Boom, you're back in the church. And then he runs afoul with Joseph because Joseph didn't implement the Union of Lions. So he gets rid of Joseph. He's no longer any good. Then John Beckos comes in. And then he dies. His son takes over. His son is Andronicus II. Andronicus is like, I don't like this union, so bye-bye John Beckos. Let's get Joseph back. I am not kidding, guys. Read Byzantine history. No, read primary sources. Read primary sources of Byzantine history. That's all I do. That's all. This is where I learned this stuff. And if you learn it all, you will ruin anyone if you debate this stuff. Oh, it's good. Oh man, just that last part about the Arsenite schism was not part of the initial presentation, but I just thought I'd add it in there. Yeah,
No,
and
I appreciate that. Yeah, just adding this extra little cherry on top at the end.
yeah, no. Do you have any questions, John?
Oh man, I know you have sent me. Remind me what that book, The Annals of what? Can you show me that real quick? The one that
Yeah,
talks about the God of Muhammad and how the emperor had that removed.
it's called O City of Byzantium: The Annals of Nicetas Cognatus. I believe he was a monk. Now, the stuff that you'll find. By the way, this whole chronicle is amazing. You learn about interesting characters like the emperor of Cyprus, the rogue emperor named Isaac Comnenus, the one who captured Richard the Lionheart ships in the Third Crusade. Then Richard the Lionheart went to conquer the entire island. Yeah, page 120 and to about 123. Now, his book costs $90 American. So send me a message on X and I will send you the photocopies of those pages. I sent it to another fellow, an Oriental Orthodox fella. Yeah, and he was blown away by this stuff. I think he was more interested in the John 14:28 stuff, but I sent him the whole thing. So send me a message on X and I'll send it to you if you're watching this. And I'll also send you the excerpt with what you the Muslims have to denounce when they become Orthodox, just to show you that what the emperor did is present to this day.
Yeah, I know you sent me that part. Yeah. And no, that's just wild to me because I think that example in particular is just a great proof text to how the East essentially just got taken over and became a state religion. But
yeah, and it essentially continued to be a state religion under the Turks. They like I told you how they appointed the emperor, the patriarch. Again, how is that valid? How is that valid jurisdiction to have an Islamic sultan appoint your patriarch?
yeah,
Anyway,
that
the patriarch of Constantinople. This is the highest office in the Eastern Orthodox Church, appointed by a Muslim. Anyway,
yeah.
not
No,
my
that's
problem. So guys, if you ever have any more questions about this, and there's tons of more reasons. I can't
yeah.
I can't there's tons of more reasons as well.
Hmm.
And if you want this, come into my DMs. Read Agatho's letter, read all the books. Oh, I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to give some recommended reading. to the viewers, all the Eastern Orthodox inquirers. One is On the Roman Pontiff by Saint Robert Bellarmine.
Yes.
Um,
Read
yeah,
that one.
it's 640 pages. It's long. It's available in English. Thank you, Ryan Grant. And it's such a gift. It's a crime that this stuff hasn't been translated earlier. But uh, uh, um, yeah, no, it's good evidence for the papacy, and it pretty much stands the test of time. Very small amounts of it are outdated, but just very small amounts. Most of it is just prime stuff. And he talks about temporal authority too. The temporal authority part is brilliant. The whole work is brilliant. It's just, yeah. So read this book. Yes, it's 640 pages and the pages are big, but I mean, if you're making a commitment for the end of your life, you owe it to read Michael Welton, read the Orthodox Michael Welton. And notice I'm quoting Catholics. It always boggles the mind when all these Eastern Orthodox apologists, including, unfortunately, Craig Truglia, quotes Papalism by Denny. That's in his. Why are you quoting Protestant stuff? J. Dyer. Oh, you got to read Papalism. You know, it's unfortunate. So I'm quoting you purely Catholic stuff. The Controversies, Tome 1 on the Roman Pontiff. Okay, that's the first book to read. The second book to read is An Orthodox Saint, The Ecclesiastical History of the English People by the one and only Venerable Bede. Venerable Bede, it's just a good read. And if you're an English speaker, it's your it's your spiritual heritage as well. And see how they treated the Pope and the Filioque, by the way, and other things. The last book is not really an apologetics book. It's called The Imitation of Christ. And this book is a glimpse into Catholic spiritual life. You probably watch Jay Dyer's live streams where he makes fun of Catholic saints, saying they're pre-list and stuff. But okay, I challenge you, read this book. Read this book. The Imitation. This book was written in 1420. It's 600 years old. Read this book and tell me if this is pre-list spiritual delusion or whatnot. And yeah, because this is our spiritual life. It'll give you a glimpse into our spiritual life. So yeah, those are the three books I recommend. And yeah, if you got any final questions,
Yeah.
we can kill the stream.
I don't think so. Well, I wasn't planning to do a Q&A for this stream because we wanted to keep it, nice and concise, and that was really great. And I like the use of St. Robert Bellarmine and Thomas à Kempis at the end.
Great books.
And yeah, with that, I do really appreciate having you on.
Thank you.
Is there anything you wanted to say before I kill the stream?
Well, and one more thing I could recommend to the Orthodox, if you really want to try our spiritual life, pray the rosary.
Yes.
Pray the rosary. In fact, I recommend everyone pray the rosary, Protestants included. Catholics, technically it's our thing, but we don't have a monopoly. There are Protestants who pray the rosary. And I'm not talking about like high church Anglicans. I'm talking about like Baptists and stuff, because they know the power of the rosary. And so, yeah, and an Eastern Orthodox won't have any problems praying to the Theotokos, because they certainly not. But that's another glimpse into our spirituality. So this is our spirituality, the Rosary, and the Imitation of Christ. Go find a local Catholic church, and then hopefully we will say welcome home.
Amen. All right. With that, thank you all for tuning in. It was a great talk by Allan here. Again, I appreciate having you coming on. And with that, I will kill the stream. God bless.
God bless.